Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Williamsburg City Council meeting of June 10th. Ms. Felico, if you could call the roll, please.
Mr. Rogers.
Here.
Ms. Ramsey.
Here.
Mayor Pons.
Here.
Vice Mayor Dent.
Here.
Mr. Maslin.
Here. You all have in your packet the meeting minutes. Are there any additional corrections or revisions?
I sent 2 items, which I think have been taken care of.
Thank you, Ted, for Mr. Maslin for finding those.
So if there are no other corrections, I move that all 4 sets of minutes be approved.
Second.
Aye.
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 Okay, next on our agenda is the matter of special privilege, which is the Business Appreciation Award. So I'm going to come to the podium. So this is our 16th year of doing the Business Appreciation Award, and as all of you know, existing businesses are an extremely valuable component to our local economy. These folks make significant personal investments of time and resources to make their businesses successful, and ultimately it makes our community stronger. And so this year's winner is Aoshi's, I always say it wrong, sorry. It's a Japanese ramen and hibachi grill located on Prince George Street. And today we have with us Amy Lau and David Lamb, who are here to accept the award. So if you guys would come forward, I'd like to present you with a little token of our appreciation. Do a little photo op and everything, so come on over here and we'll take a picture. Yeah, you can hopefully hang that in your restaurant somewhere nice.
Let's not drop it now.
Well, it's replaceable. Take a picture. Would you like to say something?
Sure. Okay. We first moved here from New York City back in 2014, taking a leap of faith and quitting our corporate jobs and worked at Oishi. And during my time in the William & Mary MBA School of Business, we met a lot of interesting and amazing supporters who has helped us with the restaurant itself, including Robbie, who was part of the Virginia Beer Company. He himself was very instrumental in supporting me, not as a student in the MBA program, but also as someone who we can look up to. And so because of him and his courage and the strength that he put in the Virginia Beer Company before it became conception as a beer company back then, it gave us a lot of strength and courage to, not only when I graduated from the business school with David to take over Oishi and make it what it is today. And I'm sure there's a lot of struggles that we are going to encounter in the next couple of years, but because of all the support we've had from the city, from everyone, that we are taking a leap of faith and continuing Oishi to where it is and where we'll be in the next 2-3 years from now. So we do thank you, Mayor Pons, and everyone who is here today to witness this. We just have amazing things in store for the next few years for not only the restaurant, but also for the city as well. So thank you so much.
Wonderful. A little video here we'd like to show the audience.
Co-owners Amy Lau and David Lamb started out at Oishi, a Japanese ramen and hibachi grill restaurant, as employees before purchasing and revamping the restaurant a few years ago. As a graduate of William & Mary, Amy has maintained strong ties with the campus community through social media and events. When the pandemic hit and Oishi's future was in question, former students began a social media campaign to encourage people to support the restaurant. The newly raised awareness, combined with Oishi's already prolific social media presence, enabled them to continue operating without a dining room. The City of Williamsburg recognizes Oishi for its hard work and dedication to making the city a better place to live, work, and visit.
all haven't eaten there, you need to. It's very, very good. I know we do takeout at least once every 2 weeks, so
Yeah,
keep up the good work.
Yeah, we're closed today because we're on vacation technically, but once we open, our dining room will be open again. So you guys are the first to know.
No, wonderful, good. It looks like you have a new family member with you.
Yes, we
Well,
have a
congratulations.
pandemic baby.
Well,
yeah.
congratulations on that
Thank
as
you.
well. Well, thank you so much.
Nice to meet you. Thank you.
He wants to be heard. Okay, so that takes us now to public hearings, and today we have consideration of grant of an easement to Dominion Energy for a strategic underground wiring project in Pinecrest neighborhood. Mr. Small, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll keep this short and sweet because I know you have a very long agenda. Dominion Energy, as part of their strategic underground program, has requested an easement along the frontage of pump station number 3, located at 717 Monumental Avenue. This is just for the placement of an easement and a location of a piece of equipment right near where the existing pole is shown on the attached picture on the slide. And I'm available for any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Small. Are there any questions?
So, this is great, the more that Dominion will put the conductors underground at their cost, the better. How many parcels are involved in this specific project for Dominion?
I don't know how many are overall involved. I just know that they're requesting the easement on our particular parcel because this is the only one we own within the neighborhood other than the right-of-way. There's about, I believe it's about 100 lots within the Pinecrest neighborhood.
Okay.
This is along Tanyard, Monumental, Grove Avenues, and I can't remember the other one.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions before the public hearing?
No?
Okay, with that, we will open the public hearing, which is an opportunity for anybody in the audience who would like to speak to this matter to come forward. Mark, you have nothing to say? All right, seeing no one coming forward, are there any additional comments?
Whatever we can do to support underground wiring. Forward.
Particularly when someone else is paying for it.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely true. It's not often that Virginia Power will, pick up 100% of the cost. So we're fortunate to have that, and I know that the folks in Pinecrest are going to be excited to have this brought to their neighborhood as well. Is there a motion?
Well, I would, except, let me get to it here.
A motion that the city council approves the easement at 717 Monumental Avenue to Dominion Energy for the strategic underground program.
Second?
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Mr. Maslin?
Aye.
Good. So now it takes us to the item 6 on the agenda, which is reports. And first we have the monthly financial statement. Ms. Dameron?
Good afternoon, and as usual, I'll begin the update with the COVID-19 update for May. Just to recall, this update is based on a worst-case scenario budget, and the variance is comparing actual year-to-date for May to the projection for year-to-date May. And as you can see, we are ahead of our projection in every category, with the exception of lodging. And lodging is still trailing the projection by $628,000. I will note that we did see some improvement in lodging in both activity for March and April compared to 20. But compared to March and April of 19 for the month, we were lagging about 36 to 37%. Year to date, we are lagging compared to FY19 by 55%. We also saw some improvement in meals, which is ahead of the projection by $173,000. We saw some significant increase for the monthly data, but compared to FY19, we're still about 14% below our 19 actual. Then in total expenditures, we are ahead or below, but we have a positive variance in expenditures of $736,000. So that brings us to a net positive variance of $7.2 million, and that's comparing to an anticipated $9.6 million deficit at this point. So that reduces that to about 2.4. And of course, in June, we will have some additional revenue coming in, but we're also going to have expenses and accruals. So we'll know our year-end results soon. And then in some other notes regarding some of our other funds, in sales tax, the collections received in May for March activity exceeded the same time period in FY19 by 35% for the month. And in historic sales tax, we also saw that we exceeded the same time period compared to FY19 by 22%. So that's good news. That'll help us make up some of the shortfalls that we've experienced so far this year. In utility, our water revenue compared to FY20 or compared to May of year-to-date FY20 is 15% less. We did note that in April and May, our consumption exceeded the same time periods in FY20, but we're still lower than we were fiscal year-to-date in May for FY19 by about 18%. And then our sewer revenue has decreased compared to May year-to-date of FY20 by 3%. That concludes my report. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
I don't have any questions. Thank you, Ms. Dameron. Just comment, it's good to see. I know we've all noticed a lot of activity around the city in the last few months, so fortunately it's starting to reveal itself in some of the positive numbers that you've talked about. Although they're not where we'd like to see them, they're at least, there's some rebound there from the activity that we've seen in the city. So thank you.
Thanks for the report. I concur with the Vice Mayor's comments.
I do as well. Thank you. I think the important thing to note is even though we're ahead of our negative projection, we're still in the hole. Correct. And sometimes when you see that positive number at the end, it gets everyone excited, but we have to look at the column next to it to really get a true representation.
And hopefully we'll see some of those lines trending back to normalcy soon. My only question is, closing out fiscal year 2021, will the COVID updates continue on a monthly basis into 2022?
We can certainly do that. So yes, I mean, we can compare to what we're projecting based on history. Just bear in mind that we don't have really great trend data in this environment. I think my new favorite phrase is unprecedented uncertainty. With that in mind, it's a bit of a challenge to kind of figure out where you want those projections, particularly when you get it down to a monthly level, but we can certainly do that.
It's certainly helpful monthly, and maybe it's something that we just continue through the summer and the tourism season, but I would hope to see it. Thank you. It's always very helpful.
No, I would agree. It's good to see numbers trending in the right way, and when you look at lodging numbers up 500% over last month or last year this month, that's pretty significant. But as the chart will demonstrate, it's still lagging behind 2019 significantly. And I know we all have seen added people come to town, and numbers are looking good. I was talking to the executive director of the Hotel Association. Numbers for Memorial Day weekend, the average daily rate and RevPAR were through the roof, numbers that we haven't seen in a long time. So hopefully that trend will continue. But again, who knows how long this rebound will last, and so I think that kind of, there's still a great deal of uncertainty out there that we need to be prepared for. So, thank you. Okay, also in your agenda packet is the monthly departmental operating reports. Mr. Trivets going to tell us they're here for our perusal.
You've memorized my script.
Are there any questions for the city manager? Mr. Trivett, while you're there, I don't know what you might say next for the city manager's report.
The only thing I wanted to say today is I want to congratulate Mark on a new certification. We received a notice this morning from his instructor. He took a class on, was it cyber defense, Mark? I forgot, but he has a new title. What is it?
It was a CIO class, a government CIO class.
That's right. So he's now a certified government CIO, and I just wanted to make a note because I got a custom email from his instructor this morning to me telling me that he graduated with honors, which was a rare distinction held by only a few of the class members. So congratulations,
Oh,
Mark.
congratulations.
There's no correlation between that and base time at all.
Well done.
Well, and I think we're better served, particularly in this environment of cyber, blackmail and all that kind of stuff. And so it's good to know that you're working to protect our systems and make sure that we're continue to deliver the services uninterrupted as best we can. So thank you. Shelton, sir.
Nothing at this time.
All right. So that takes us to unfinished business. Item A, consideration and approval of the proposed ordinance 2103, the set of the cigarette tax.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So this is the first action item on the budget for the council. As you all know, we've been talking for 2 years now about raising the cigarette tax. General Assembly limited our authority over the last General Assembly session. This takes it to the maximum amount, which will match the neighboring counties. We did have the request from the Commissioner of Revenue to provide more time for her office to prepare for the increase. And so we've modified the ordinance so that this does not take effect until October.
Are there any questions or comments?
I've none.
No.
All right, so I thank you for establishing writing the ordinance to take in consideration of the Commissioner's recommendation. It provides the office opportunity to implement the tax, to get it done. I think then it's in our best interest to follow through on that. So if there's no other questions or comments, is there a motion?
Yes, I move that council adopt proposed ordinance 21-03, setting the cigarette tax rate at 2 cents per cigarette.
Second.
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Mr. Maslin?
Aye.
Okay, next on the agenda is consideration and approval of Resolution 21-07, adopting the budget for the fiscal year FY22.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So it just wouldn't be a budget discussion without a handy-dandy PowerPoint. So today we're going to show you one that is pretty straightforward, very simple. We put together this one in response to your questions and some comments from the speakers from Monday's meeting. And so this first couple of slides talks about how we have reduced the budget since February. And it's important, I think, to just sort of reiterate that our budget process begins in December. So we're not that many months away from starting this whole process again. And it begins with the department submitting budgets that get reviewed by the finance team and myself, and negotiating with the department heads on what we can include and can't include based on revenue projections. So in this process, we did ask the department heads to constrain their budgets to the same levels as FY21, and that includes exceptions, which are those things that are contracted to go up, including some personnel costs. And so you're limited in what you can restrict. But this is a list of some examples, and the overall number that represented was about $200,000 in savings in the operating expenses. And then on the capital improvement side, as you know, that's where we've spent most of our time focused. The total reduction is about 2.2 in all the actions that we have taken. And you can see the list here of projects that have been in some way altered, whether they were paid for in some other way, they were removed from the plan entirely, or pushed out. And then the last column are projects that were withheld, which means the department requested that they be included, and we did not include them in the plan. They would have been included had we been able to afford them. So these are all representative reductions that got us basically from December to today's adoption.
And I asked the city manager to put this in our packet so that the public can see this, because as we've been discussing the need for a tax increase, some of the questions that we've heard from the public were, well, what are we cutting and what have we pushed back? And, I didn't want the public to think that we hadn't done some additional due diligence in budgeting, and certainly staff has done that. And by removing or postponing some of these projects, we've pushed back some $2.2 million in an attempt to save money this year in our CIP. So that work has been done. Thank you.
So then we move into sort of the meat of today's discussion, and that is the council had asked us to look at some new scenarios, some additional models that showed the 5-year forecast that we've been working on for various levels of tax increase. And so we put this slide together just sort of remind you what our mission is. Our mission is to present to you a budget that balances the general fund, the capital improvement plan, and meets all of your financial policies and goals to the extent that we can. It's not always possible. When we sat down to do that, it became obvious to us that the only way to do that was with the lowest possible tax rate of 68 cents. And we're going to show you that in just a second. We just wanted to note that the key factor of the models we're about to show you is that exploring a lower tax rate than 98 cents creates a situation where you miss a year of revenue generation at that higher level. And it impacts the balances of the funds in the latter years of the 5-year horizon. And that's why we keep saying that this decision is about the long-term fiscal health of the city. So assumptions to build the models are the same ones that we've used for the models that we've been showing you in the last few meetings. You had asked us to be more aggressive in our revenue forecast, and we've continued that into this modeling. And then on the expenditure side, though, we are being conservative in the expenditure growth. And that's not representative necessarily of additional departmental requests, but includes also the expenses of materials that increase over time. And we're certainly experiencing that now. So this slide, and I'm sorry for the size of it, but if you're following along online, you can see the full-size version of it. This shows you 4 different models for the fiscal year budget that goes out 5 years, both starting at a 60-cent rate, a 64-cent rate, a 66-cent rate, and a 68-cent rate for the real property tax. And as I said, it shows you 5 years of progression. The first set of charts is the general fund balances. The second set of charts are the capital improvement plan balances, and the last set of charts are the projected end-of-year fund balances, and otherwise known as the reserve. So those are the 3 things that we focus on when somebody says, what's the fiscal health of the city? Are these 3 categories of expense. So what we're showing you here is how, if we adopted a 60-cent rate today, and then next year adopted an 8-cent increase to that, bringing the tax rate in the city to 68, which is what we have proposed for this year, you can see how the balances just don't work. The importance of this particular slide is to show you that the status quo of what we've recommended today doesn't carry forward if you miss that year of revenue generation. And it doesn't work not only for the 60-cent proposal, but any of the other proposals as well. In fact, even with the 68-cent rate we have proposed, there are still concerns regarding the reserve balance. And as you know, that's been our concern from the beginning. I think one of the criticisms this budget has had has been, you have a reserve, you should use it. And we have used it considerably over the last 2 fiscal years, and will continue to do so in 22. One of the things I said to a council member earlier today is, financial management is not something that we only do from December until June when the budget is final. Ms. Stammer and her staff manage the budget every single day of operation. And their focus is to make sure that all of these balances continue to perform and that adjustments are made so that we can hit the targets at the end of the year that accommodate for the things that we didn't predict, right? The revenue lines that come in less than expected, the revenue lines that come in more than expected, the expenses that the department heads were unable to anticipate. It's a full-time job, which is why we have an entire department of finance staff working on that. One of the things that we do and have done throughout the pandemic is try to slow down and minimize the amount of money taken from the reserve to balance each year's fiscal year budget, knowing that the hardest year would probably be FY22. So as we come into FY22, our reserve balance is, I'll say, artificially higher because of those steps taken by the finance department, so that we can complete 22 with what we've shown you here at 33% if you adopt the 68-cent rate. So I think it's important to illustrate that this is a thing that happens, a work that occurs day in and day out. So then the next slide shows you the question I think that we were asked at the last meeting, which is, what would we have to raise the rate by in subsequent year, meaning next year, if we don't do the staff recommendation of 68 cents today? And so these set of charts show you the same thing. You've got four scenarios, 60 cents, 64 cents, 66 cents, and 68 cents, all representing the real property tax that you might adopt today. And then it shows you how that impacts the general fund, the CIP in the middle, and then the last one is the fund balance projection, assuming that you will raise the rate the necessary amount to achieve the right balances next year. So then the last bit of this slide shows you what the rate needs to be increased by in FY23's budget. So as I said earlier, we will start that process in December, and at the City Council's financial retreat in February, I will be showing you slides very similar to this and telling you what our recommendation will be for the tax rate in FY23. And it will largely be predicated on the action that you take today. The unknown, of course, is what will the revenues do during the fiscal year? What will the expenses be like during the fiscal year? Both of those will have an outcome on what we recommend in February. So this is our best projection. As you can see here, the issue, and there's a couple, is if you look at the general fund section of the slide, you can see at the bottom the surplus deficit at the end of FY22, and obviously the lower the tax rate you adopt, the higher the deficit is, and all of that money is then taken from the reserve, which translates into the outcomes on the right hand of the slide, which is the balance of that reserve fund. And as you can see, in some of the scenarios, it's pretty stark, the difference. And as you heard from Davenport, our financial advisor, on Monday, these trends are what is concerning to the rating agencies. And so the impacts of depleting that reserve and not having a plan to restore it are what would trigger the rating agency to maybe make a revision in the rate. So I think we have one more slide, and that is just reminding you that we do have the ARPA money coming. We don't have it yet. We received additional guidance from the state yesterday. I don't know that it necessarily clarified anything other than it maybe made it a little harder to understand. There's been a new clarification that has come at 1 o'clock today that we've not had a chance to fully read. So our staff recommendation remains that, as you can see from the charts we've shown you, 68 cents really is the best tax rate we can recommend as a staff. Failing a 68-cent increase, we would urge you to consider 66. The basis for that 66-cent recommendation is it minimizes the amount that we might have to raise the rate by next year, and it also protects the reserve in a similar fashion to what we've recommended with 68. The reason that the reserve protection is important to us is because, as I said on Monday, we need to be in the business of moving forward, and we can't move forward if we're still in recovery. And we haven't recovered until we've recovered in all the ways that we depleted our reserves. And that includes the reserve, the general fund reserve, which is one we're talking about now, what we've taken from the tourism fund, what we've taken from the capital improvement plan. We have to recover all of that to get back to our forward momentum that we had before the pandemic. And we don't want that to take any longer than is absolutely necessary. So that's the staff recommendation. We're happy to answer any questions.
So I know some of you had asked for the presentation of a 0-cent increase in the budget. Have any questions you want to follow up on with the city manager on this chart?
I don't have any questions. I mean, it was, even though I was the one that asked for it, I pretty much expected that it would look, you know, it would have red numbers. So, but I do appreciate the time that was put into it to present it to us, so that we could actually see it in black and white and red.
Any questions or?
Questions and comments? or
Sure.
you wanna-
It's up to you. Well, we can just make this an open dialogue. I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah, thanks, Drew, for the updated information last night, which confirms what we said on Monday, that basically you said that the information from the Secretary of Finance that we will be eligible to receive $7.575 million within the next month as the first award, and then hopefully the second award of a similar amount within the next year. And we know that there are multiple uses of that money. And one of the clear ones that doesn't require a whole lot of explanation is to replace lost public sector revenue using this funding to provide government services to the extent of the reduction in revenue experienced due to the pandemic. And we know that finance has calculated our loss of revenue at 9.2 million. Was that the latest? Yes. So this year, you know, it seems like that would be the easy way to go after and receive the 7.57 million. It should be noted that all the information received indicates that we will be receiving this 1/2 of the ARP funds, you know, up to 5 months before we'll see any of the real estate funds. So in terms of, we should have that certainty fairly quickly. Can you put up let's see, is that yeah, Drew, on this presentation, the first up in the upper left, I'm not following the math there. Is the surplus line supposed to be a calculation with deducting the expenditures from the revenue?
Then that's correct.
That math doesn't add up for me.
Be more specific.
So if we subtract 39.63, is it 63 or 83?
From 41.38.
From 41.38, are we really getting $3.32? In the negative? It should be a positive in terms of math calculation.
No, it's a negative. I'm questioning the.
And then the next year,
that's
the
you know,
revenue.
it looks like
The revenues too.
we should be getting over $1 instead of that 31 cents.
60 cents. Do you have the backup on the 60? I've got the detail right here.
So is it maybe the revenue's wrong?
Yeah,
And reversed.
Because you're showing a higher revenue for 60 cents than 64 cents.
okay. So the way that I know the 3.32 is correct is because I'm looking at my transfer from reserves. The number for the revenue would be 39.63, or, yeah, 39.63. Which includes, so we back out the 3.32 from the 39. So the actual revenue then is going to be 36.31 compared to the 39.63
39.63.
which is going to give you the 3.32.
And then there'd be similar corrections as we go to the right?
To the right.
Like for FY 2023, that
Yeah,
math.
so I think what happened is we got the expenditure line and the revenue line needs to be reduced by, or in this case, we're on the 10-cent slide. So moving forward in that line, by adding the 10 cent, we're balancing the general fund. But that first revenue should be the 39.63 is the total revenue, which includes the 3.2. And I think what happens is we're used to showing a balanced budget, so we always include the reserve and the revenue when we're doing it, and caught a few of those. And I think you actually have a similar situation in the 68 cent, because we're showing 40.07. And if you look all the way over on the fund balance slide, there's a line that says increase or decrease, and that decrease is a 2.084. And so in 22, even with 68 cents, we don't fully, we have a deficit to the tune of 2.0684. And again, I think we get in a habit of showing that always equal, and just that slipped by us. I apologize.
Okay, so continuing looking at this spreadsheet, and correct me if I'm wrong, but let's remember that what is not included in here is the ARP fund for this year of 7.75 million, for next year of 7.75 million. For this 5-year CIP, we have not taken into consideration the savings in the school district's published 5-year CIP plan that would save us $3.1 million. Is that correct?
Yeah, my understanding, they did not include the elementary because it wasn't a preschool, is it?
Right, the county rejected the school board's original CIP proposal that included the new school for elementary school expansion. And so what I have said all along is we need to continue to budget for that, because what the county has said is not that they're not going to build a new facility, but it may not be an elementary school. And the school system has told us, including in our joint sessions, they expect the cost for either one to be very similar.
Now, all of this is to say that when we look at the 5-year tables, without this information, especially the ARP funds that are available if we chose to use them, that the red numbers may be overstated. And looking at the comment saying that we would need up to 10 cents increase over the remaining 4 years, we know that that would equal $2 million per year, or a total of $8 million over 4 years. So subtracting $8 million from our $18.6 million, we still have, $8 million in additional funds over 4 years, not yet assigned to expend. Talking about the 35% reserve, so the tables on the right are based on the 35% reserve assumption. And we'll be talking about that later in the meeting as to what we want our policy to be. I would recommend that we actually look at different options there, because if we see the reserve as a rainy day fund, we know that we're going to dip into it in times of economic stress and maybe not keep what the number is. We also know that there are other ways to look at a reserve. For example, we could set the reserve as a percent of non-discretionary spending rather than all the spending. I think one of the challenges we see as we spend more, as the city grows, we spend more and calculate that 35%, the number goes up. And I think maybe we need to reevaluate, is that really what we should be doing in terms of that calculation? So going to the 6 cents increase in the tax rate as one of the proposals. That is equal to $1.2 million for the first year. If we were to use $1.2 million of the ARP funds that we'll get within the next month, this is only really using 16% of this year's ARP funds. And there's plenty of other, it'd be what, $6.3 million left for other uses that the City Council may want to use it for. So where do we stand now? So the city manager has submitted the staff's annual budget request. It's now up to City Council to determine its budget priorities and make policy decision on how to pay for those costs. This year has been unusual in several ways. One, we've seen the economic stress experienced by both our businesses and some of our residents. And two, we've just got this pleasant surprise, the gift of the additional funds available from the federal government this year and next year. I think that we have City Council consensus on supporting staff recommended expenses and capital projects for FY22. So the critical policy question in front of us is to whether we take advantage of the federal funds we will receive within the next month, or do we increase the tax rate for real estate? Thanks.
So Pat, we got out of order. Would you like to jump in there with some comments?
Please. As obviously this has been quite the budget journey, and it has been a journey for all of us, and the work that we've imposed on Ms. Dameron and her staff and Mr. Trivett to keep coming back with numbers. But as we started this journey, and many of you know I was a former city employee, so I understand budgets, and there was no doubt in my mind that Mr. Trivett was looking at the numbers, that he was going to come forward with a proposal that included a tax increase. I didn't look at the numbers close enough to think it would be an 8-cent tax increase. So that was a surprise to me, not that it was inaccurate, it was just a surprise to me. So as we've gone along this journey, I said from the beginning, it's been an unprecedented year, as Ms. Dameron's new word, and the impact that COVID's had on the community and on the city. So the balance for me has been, since this original tax proposal, what is a tax increase that helps the city start to move into recovery, doesn't address all of the needs based on the information that's been provided, but also doesn't put all of that impact on the community in a year where we've been affected by everyone in business, and the community has been affected by COVID, and how do we minimize that impact on the community? The mayor talked about on Monday, using some of the ARPA funds to provide grants to businesses and citizens who have suffered through the pandemic. I said this early on, I'm fortunate that I'm one of the ones that hasn't suffered financially. There's others out there in the community, but there's many out there in the community that have. And if we can find a way to use those ARPA funds to help them out with whatever tax rate we agree on. So in my mind, from day one, even though it doesn't meet the needs of the community of a no tax increase, and it doesn't necessarily meet the city's need for an 8-cent tax increase, I felt a compromise to avoid a 10 or 10 plus requested proposal next year, that we look at a number of 64 cent and not the 66 or the 68. I've gone back and forth on this, and I asked for the numbers on the zero budget, although again, I'm not a financial expert, but I knew what those numbers were going to look like. But I wanted to see it for myself and weigh the difference between all of these figures. And it was good to see the charts laying out all the different 66 through no increase. Councilman Maslin's point to the ARPA funds, there's, how we use that money is going to be critical, because it is a one-time windfall of money that we're going to have to make the best use of. Early on, I thought the best use of it was to buy us 1 year of tax relief. The more you look into that, and Mr. Trivets laid out and Mr. Maslin's laid out, there are some restrictions there. But is that the best use of that money to buy down the tax rate for 1 year, and then we come back next year and we're faced with a 10 or 12 cent tax increase? I think 64 cent is the number to get us on the road to recovery and not place all of the burden on the community. And I hope that's something we consider moving forward.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Ramsey?
Thank you. Thank you all again for another couple hectic days of working on the budget and numbers and charts and presentations and things like that. So before I make my comments, which everyone expects me to do these days, I guess, I had a couple questions on the CIP. And partially because if you can put up that chart, projects removed or postponed. So over the past few months, we've heard people say CIP, a lot of these things are wants as opposed to needs. And I guess my question is, for all of these projects that have been pushed back, postponed, withheld, what kind of a projection do we have for bringing them back? Is that based on the tax rate that we passed today? Is that based somewhat on the ARPA money? Okay.
It's a little bit of all the above. What we will be doing is, as we get to December again, the department heads for projects that were not included at all, I'm sure we'll come back with those requests and try to get them in again next year. For projects that were pushed out, as we put together the budget for 23, we'll go through the similar exercise of what can we afford, what can we not, and they will be subject to be moved out again. And then as far as the ARP funding, that's a decision that we have to make as a group, and it's largely a policy decision. Right before this meeting, I was at a meeting of the CAO group for the peninsula talking about how we were all going to handle the decision, and it's an interesting question, I think. No matter whether you're Hampton, Newport News, James City County, York County, Pocosin, or Williamsburg, we all have distinct needs. But what was common around the table of the appointed leaders is that we all recognize this is a very rare moment in time. It may be a once occurrence where we have this funding as a grant from the federal government and the ability to move our communities collectively forward toward that vision in fairly short order. I said to you on Monday, and I really believe it, this money represents the opportunity to advance timelines for projects that have a 50-year horizon to 5. And that's an opportunity that shouldn't be missed. I think that VML, the Virginia Municipal League, had requested that the governor assemble a task force to consider the highest and best use of this money, both at the state level and at the locality level, and really focus that group on identifying ways that the state funds and the locality funds could be used together to achieve that sort of monumental forward momentum that produces return in the economy, both at the state and local level. And so I think that's not without merit. I hope that we can take our time with this. That's the advantage of the timeline the federal government has given us. Let the rules settle. We were talking today at our meeting about the fact that the federal government is likely going to wait on any challenge that might come to be resolved before they finalize the rules. Even the clarification letter that we got from the Secretary of Finance for Virginia made it clear that the amount they have communicated that we will get is subject to change as the Treasury continues to deal with questions from states on how they handle the allocations. So I think it's to our advantage not to make that decision too quickly, and certainly to our advantage to really spend the time thinking about those long-term projects that represent really fundamental change, particularly in our revenue model, and can this money be used to advance those ideas?
Well, I have a couple comments about the ARP money, but one reason I was asking about the CIP is I received an email from someone who is very anxious for one of the sidewalks to be completed. And for a lot of people, it's like, oh, it's a sidewalk, Newport Avenue. I could drive up that street 1,000 times a week because GPS directs me up there. As everyone knows, that's a little touch point with me. But you know, we have people living on Newport Avenue. We have the young families in the Oaks, and they want to be able to walk and take advantage of that amenity that Williamsburg offers, but they're afraid to do so because of the amount of traffic and the speed that's along those two streets. And so her concern was, when will this project be put back into the budget? When can I see some movement? Because if I fear for my children's safety, then I might not want to continue living in the neighborhood that I live in. And so when we first started talking about all these projects, I went through them and created a spreadsheet, and it's like, okay, so the DMV demo, a lot of people say, oh, you know, how important is that? It's a really huge number. But I would say that it's a real factor in our economic development because people and developers want site-ready sites. They don't want to have to come in and put forward the money to do that. And then we look at some of these for quarter-pass softball field dugout. Oh, you know, what's that have to do? Well, if we really want to grow our sports tourism, then it's important to have safe, well-maintained facilities in all of our parks and recreation areas that are used to draw in tournaments and therefore draw in additional people, and therefore raise our tax revenues so that we don't have to depend as much on real estate taxes. And you referenced VML and their comments to ARP, and I think we're referencing the same little blurb that was in the VML magazine this month. And the president of VML, and I guess he's the chair of the towns, said that ARPA is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to make fundamental improvements to our infrastructure, provide crucial help to our residents, businesses, and schools that could have impact far beyond the immediate crisis. And I think that if we do use ARP to buy down for 1 year, it's sort of like blowing a lottery payment, which to me is a disservice to the community. We received something in an email yesterday, I guess, from Ron Kirkland, including 2 plans that Fairfax County, which received their FY22 tranche, I learned what that word meant, on June the 1st, as well as Loudoun counties, and Loudoun counties is a lot more complicated, but it was interesting that Fairfax put aside 11% for tourism businesses because we think we're the tourism king in Virginia, but it's a huge revenue and it's $1 billion industry, much more so for Virginia. But anyway, Fairfax recognized the value of tourism for them, and so they're putting aside 11% for those most impacted. And I would hope when we develop our plan, I'd like to propose that we do the same for participants in our tourism business, and not just restaurants, not just lodging, because they're going to get additional money. We talked yesterday at the EDA meeting about the CBDG grants, if I've got those letters correct, that are coming down, the restaurant relief, the lodging relief. But I think we need to do it also for the workers, those who have really been most impacted, assist in their basic needs such as housing, food stability, transportation, and areas that might not be covered under the federal and state programs. And so I agree that we need to have a long view of what we're going to do with this money because I don't think it's going to come around again. And I'm guessing that we won't get our first tranche until July, which would put us in FY22, and so then the next allotment wouldn't come really until FY23.
Yeah, I mean,
12 months away.
we can submit the application now. The letter from the secretary said that we would get the payment soon.
Yeah. And I didn't read the whole thing from Secretary Lane, but I did notice that if we don't use it correctly, we have to pay it back.
That's right.
So I think that's key to everyone. And so since Monday, we've heard from various people and additional information, and I've really appreciated those who've agreed to meet and talk with me. It's provided me better insight into their concerns, as I've really struggled to understand resistance without specifics. I'm a very sort of pragmatic kind of person, and it's like people have said no without really delineating why or how. Is the extra amount going that they might have to pay for taxes? Is that going to impact their ability to make a car payment and thus not have a car to get to work? Are they not going to be able to afford childcare? Are they going to have to dip into their personal reserves? I'm a problem solver, so I like to know what the problem is to know exactly how we can help. And for a lot of people too, it's, taking that money from their savings account. And so like with the personal savings account, our reserve is to save for emergencies. And I think if we look around at our key partners, Colonial Williamsburg and William and Mary Athletics, I think we recognize what has happened to them if they and when they dipped into their reserves. I mean, I think there was a reference that Colonial Williamsburg was going to be broken 5 or 6 years if they didn't stop that 12% draw in their endowment. And I'm on the William and Mary Tribe Club board, and we were advised that in 6 years, William and Mary Athletics completely used up their reserve. In 2015, they started tapping it each and every year to balance the budget, reflecting on ongoing structural budget deficit. And in 21, completely gone. And so I think that's something that we do need to take into account. And let me see, what's my next point here? I mentioned about the CIP, and I mentioned about the ARPA funds, and we have heard from a lot of people, both pro and con, but I really think with the population of 15,000 in our city, that the silent majority is being silent, because the far greater numbers of people have not spoken out one way or the other. And I think that they are trusting their elected officials to do the right thing. And as I've spoken before, I'm very high on trust in professional staff, and I'm also feel that the populace has trust in us elected officials to do the right things for the residents. We're the ones that created the GIOs, and it's only through taking the hard steps that we're going to be able to do that. And I have often said, too, that success of our three-legged stool, Colonial Williamsburg, William and Mary, and the city, to thrive and flourish is dependent on the success of each other. And another quote that from William and Mary Athletics says, they look to balance excellence while taking into account equity and financial sustainability. One can replace William and Mary with Williamsburg in this quote. I hope William and Mary will never mistake existence for excellence in the experience we provide our student athletes, our residents. At this institution, we should expect to excel in any endeavor we undertake. If that is what we expect, we should have the courage to reevaluate what and how much we can undertake to achieve this goal. And one of our goals is courageously leading. And I also remember that when I was running for city council in 2016, I had a sign out in the pasture at CW, and someone came up to me and she said, "Are you running for city council?" And I said, "Yes, how'd you know?" And she said, "Well, you got that big sign in the back of your car." She said, "Well, remember, if you're elected, that Williamsburg belongs to the entire country. It's not just the residents of Williamsburg. Our position as a city goes far beyond our borders, and what might be wants in other communities are viewed as necessities for us to retain that position, whether it's landscaping, whether it's public safety. Tourists in William and Mary we're all one related, and the reflection to me on what makes us special is tied to accepting and approving the city manager's budget. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Ms. Ramsey. Mr. Rogers?
I like that quote, Williamsburg belongs to the country. That's a good one. I feel like I should start by saying thank you to all the members of staff who have spent an inordinate amount of hours late night in the municipal building with the lights on after the sun has gone down. And I recognize I too was one of the people who wanted to see some specific numbers around what the 0-cent increase might look like, and that's resulted in a number of nights that going until 8 p.m. long after the quitting time of 5. So thank you all very much for all the effort you've put into this staff, into this presentation, that is. I've tried to approach this decision with hesitation, maybe skepticism, not at all in staff, but just in the timing of trying to be very, very purposeful about if we are to incrementally raise the real estate tax rate, is this the right idea for Williamsburg in the long term? So in May, in pushing back the vote to June, I think we were right to do that. We received a little bit more information about the ARP money. I understand there's interim final guidance and unprecedented circumstances, whatever the other oxymoron was, but I feel at least we know a little bit more about, thankfully, the lottery win that we'll be receiving. And the second thing that I think we gained a little bit of understanding on was, if we were to defer 1 year, how does that position Williamsburg in the long term, both for making us a city for the country and making sure Williamsburg is financially healthy, but also for putting us in the best position to be good stewards of the public trust in potentially where the recommendation would be next year for the real estate tax should we do nothing this year. And I think where I've fallen is after learning 3, maybe 4 things on a reasonable increase for the real estate tax. The first is the ARP and the size of it and the limitations of it. It's wonderful that we'll be receiving over the course of 2 years $15.5, potentially more, $1 million from the federal government. Those funds are limited, though, in addressing communities that have been most effective in addressing negative economic impact, water and utility and broadband expansion. It was my hope to be able to potentially defer the cost with these funds, as it has been pointed out to be a fraction of the ARP size, but I recognize now that in doing so, we don't then nullify the need for addressing the structural imbalance. All we do is just push back the demand another year. And the second thing that I learned is that the ARP incoming with limitations does not mean that immediately we can make our reserve fund whole and push it to 40%, whereas our policy is usually 35%, because it does not allow for immediate injections into the reserve funds. So I think those funds are best used for the long-term projects that we have discussed to try to address, as was shown on Monday, a graph of depleting more tourism-based revenue in Williamsburg so that we can get to the point in which our capital improvement projects can be funded through our tourism. The second thing that I've learned and been appreciative of the sentiment from I think all 5 of us is the intention for defraying, probably the right word, a tax burden should we vote to raise it today. And by that I mean, depending on what it is, we will put likely a grant in place to assist a business or an individual who can show that they have fallen into economic distress, or just like they, as many of us have, had a very difficult year this year, and in doing so would then receive a rebate essentially from the city for the tax burden that they have had. And I was also excited and glad to see that, at the end of this process, after maybe a tax is collected, that still our tourism industries may leave with a net positive impact from the city, because we do have this great amount of funding coming from the federal government, and we can do some of the work that we were talking about on Monday and we'll vote on later today in the economic development support for some of our cluster businesses, such as restaurants and lodging. I think one of the things shown that I was glad was included in the presentation today was that this has not been a decision to maintain all the wants and needs from city staff. And there's been good graphs shown that it's been about $200,000 removed from the operating fund and $2.4 million removed from the CIP fund, or at least pushed back a year. And a lot of those are physical assets, but some of those were also trainings for city staff. And we certainly want to make sure that we are providing for the city staff of Williamsburg to be well-trained. And I think in doing so, we will need to address the fact that right now we're having to supplement the CIP fund with with transfers from the general fund. The third thing that I found, and the last thing, is that the graph shown in front of us shows long-term what may be best for Williamsburg, and I see it in two ways. The first being, if we are dependent on what we do this year, where are we then next year for a recommendation for a potential increase or a maintaining of the rate? And I took the position on Monday that to defer 1 year, potentially we could be in the place to not see such a higher burden than proposed next year. And what I fear now instead is that this year we are in the position to have a grant fund that could nullify the burden of a tax increase, whereas next year, if the proposal is for 10 cents as shown, then we may not be in the position to nullify that burden on an individual, on a business, and 10 cents is much harder to budget for than a smaller increase would be this year. And the second, it may be a little harder to see as the numbers are small there, but on the right side of the column is the percentage of the reserve funds that we would have going forward. One of the things that we will not be able to vote on today, because we've fallen out of line with our best practices, is the level of our reserve funds. And the goal of council is to have that level at 35%. But it's become very apparent that should we dip too far into the reserves, and it's particularly the 60-cent level that shows we'll be at 28%, then it would take much, much longer to rebuild the reserves. And Jimmy from Davenport said on Monday that Moody's are rating agencies, which then assist the city in giving us a AAA or AA1 bond rating. They look at a long trend line of where is our reserve policy over time. And if we are to be stagnant at 28% over time, going from 35 to maybe 31 at the end of this year to 28, should we not raise the real estate tax rate, we may get deducted. We may go to AA instead. And so in being good stewards of the public trust, I don't think it's good stewardship to see 30 years of debt service payment at a higher rate for the next CIP project because we weren't good stewards with the tax rate right now. So all this being said, I'm in favor of less than 8 cents, though I recognize that that may be the recommendation from staff. I think we've been purposeful in trying to say let's be aggressive with some of our revenue projections for this next year, and I'm very hopeful seeing wonderful Memorial Day numbers and some restaurants that are performing at record numbers, certainly in the last year, but even years before that. And so I too would be in support of a 64-cent tax rate in Williamsburg for fiscal year 2022.
Thank you.
Those are my comments.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I appreciate all the comments and hard work that council's put in this discussion. And certainly staff has worked hard, as they always do, to kind of accommodate the questions that we've had and have presented us with many different options here in different scenarios. Since I've been involved in the city, but most particularly since I've been on city council, one of the most asked questions of me are, how are things in the city? And I usually follow up with, well, you live in the city, you tell me. And the response is, well, gosh, the level of service that we get from the cities, it's like nowhere else I've ever lived. And at such a low tax rate. And I think that's a positive attribute. And, I think Ms. Ramsey and Mr. Rogers spoke to it. Williamsburg is special. And it's partly special because of the good stewardship of city council and staff to make sure that we have a city that's livable, walkable, well-managed. We have health and human services that is available for people in crisis. We have well-trained police officers, well-equipped police officers, well-trained firefighters. All the staff is well-trained, and they all believe in the city because we are committed to making sure that our city staff and what we do in functioning as a government is second to none. And that's part of what makes Williamsburg special. And in order to continue to do that, we're going to need revenue. And unfortunately, we can't today depend on the traditional room and meals tax to come in at a rate that we used to get. Now, we've put some measures in place through the Tourism Development Fund to try to get that visitation back so that we can become more reliant on room and meals tax. That's all of our goals. I think all of us would like to see the greater portion of the city's revenue come from the result of sales transaction in our businesses, rather than having to rely on our individual pocketbooks through property tax. That's our goal. And we're all working, I think, to implement some of those strategies to get us back to that point. And hopefully they'll come. Who amongst us, would like to see services decline, but be the one in need of the fire truck coming to your house, or a crisis in your home where you need health and human services to come, but we're not equipped to get there, not get there in time or well trained to deal with it. I don't think any of us would want to suffer that fate. So in order to do that, we need this revenue. Meeting the needs of the capital improvement plan, balancing our reserve funds back for rainy day issues is absolutely critical. We're a small city with a relatively small budget. It doesn't take much for a major hiccup to happen and put us in a crisis situation, and we don't want to do that. I think the ARP fund, the lottery strike, so to speak, is a windfall, and it has to be managed well. And I think on the last page of the city manager's chart, if we can accomplish some of the objectives that may have taken 50 years, if we can get those done in 5 and 10 years, and deploy those dollars in ways that assist our community with job creation, housing creation, or better transportation, then we are a better community for that, rather than taking those funds to spend on operations. To me, that just doesn't make sense. So it'd be ill-advised, and I don't recommend that. And so I look forward to taking some time, making sure that we develop a plan that serves the community in the long term, rather than just meeting some immediate needs of cash flow. With that, I would like to see us entertain a 6-cent increase to 66 cents. I'm pretty good at counting up to 5. I know where the votes may be. I don't know if anybody would like to make a motion or continue the conversation.
Well, even though I dislike passing a budget that, even was said earlier, doesn't meet the needs of the city, I too can count. So I think we are left with the following, so that I move that City Council adopt Resolution 21-07, including the attached schedules and exhibit, with the following amendment to the resolution: schedules and exhibit, that the city's real estate tax rate shall be 64 cents per 100 of assessed value of taxable real estate.
Second.
Lika?
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Mr. Maslin?
That takes us to new business, consideration and approval of the comprehensive agreement for the reconstruction of Fire Station Number 1.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, ladies and gentlemen of council. Thank you. As you'll recall, back in February, you approved Mr. Trivett and the city to move forward into an interim agreement for the construction and design and drawings up to 35% for the new fire station with the design-build firm of David Nice Builders. Today, we recommend your consideration and approval to move into the stage where we enter into a comprehensive agreement with the design-build firm of David Nice Builders with a maximum guaranteed price of $13,616,774. A couple things to bring to your attention. Last year, prior to issuing the solicitation for the PPEA documents, Council agreed to limit the budget for this project to $14,576,170, which puts our guaranteed maximum price under the maximum and leaves approximately $900,000 for the soft costs to take care of all the things that we wanted to put inside of the building. back before we entered into the agreement, the initial proposals came in. The price from this team was $12,559,200. Since that time, we've worked diligently with the team and gone back several times back and forth to narrow down the design of the building. It's gone through 2 sessions of the ARB, the Architect Review Board. There's been comments from the firefighters, from people throughout the city, as well as the ARB. We even increased the size a little bit from the initial stage so that we could house more of the equipment that we wanted to put inside the station. And after the 35% completion of drawings, they came back with a price of $12,559,200. And I think I misspoke. The original price was $11,386,050. So the difference in the $11,386 and the $12,559 was driven by the city based on going from a very broad RFP scope to getting into exactly what would go in this building, taking into consideration all the input, the back and forth with the architect, the things that the ARB wanted to include to make the building more desirable in the way it looked. And from that point, we completed the 35% drawings, and we started working with the design team to come up with the comprehensive agreement. And we asked for the guaranteed maximum price, and they came back with a number of $13,616,744, which is the what we're asking today to approve to authorize us to enter into that comprehensive agreement with that guaranteed maximum price. The reason that it went up again from that initial 35% design is when we got into talking about the comprehensive agreement. As everyone knows, the construction material market is extremely volatile, and it's not very hard to predict right now. So in this proposal with the guaranteed maximum price, we have an additional $1 million owner escalation contingency that is completely in the control of the city, and it will only be used if certain prices unexpectedly go or become inflated, such as steel, such as copper, such as lumber. If that was to go up from this point forward, we have a extra owner escalation contingency that we can draw from only with the approval of the city and going through a specific set of criteria to demonstrate that the market actually has gone up, and we will only pay for that increase of what that particular construction material will be. So that is why the additional increase in the price. So to reiterate that, the first price, the $11 million that we made the decision on, partially made the decision on, we made our decision on the design build team because of their overall qualifications, their timeline, their expertise, cost, the interview process that we had, input from the community. We went through several rounds of computerized survey with input from the community, as well as the fire department, as well as the ARB. When we got into the 35%, the owner requests to get that building where we wanted it to be drove the cost from the $11 million up to the $12.5 million, and then the $13 million is only to be used if the market dictates us to do so, based on the unexpected validity of the market at this point in time. When you look at that, the timeline has also been pushed slightly out a little bit. Part of the reason for that is they went from a 12-month to a 15-month lead time on construction, and a lot of that is being driven by the market because of the long lead times on ordering some of the materials. And they can't order any of the materials until we get approval to move into the next process, and we go from the 35% design stage to the 65% stage and even further, so that we can further narrow down exactly what's going to be in the building and how it's going to what's exactly going to be needed to order. So we have it in the contract that they're going to make every effort to hold those costs under control and to push those the timeline, try to do it as quickly as possible, and they're going to work very hard. We have a commitment with them to not move our firefighters out of the existing building until absolutely necessary, until we get ready to start the demolition process. So that's where we are at this point in time. Today, I have members of of the David Nice Design Build team with us today. Brandon Nice and Jay Hobbs are here, as well as Amanda and Tom Tingle from Guernsey Tingle, our architectural firm that we're using. And also we have with us our construction management consultant from MVP, Don Young, is here. And I or any of the team is here available to answer any questions that you may have in making this decision.
Thank you, Chief. Surprise to me that costs have gone up. Where they are, that we would be faced with this challenge. But overall, I think if we're coming in under a 14.5, that's a positive step. Vice Mayor Dent?
Chief, just a couple of questions. You say you would have, obviously from the 13 million, you would have 900,000 left over. Is that, with the cost of everything else rising, do you think that's going to be enough to cover all the other items that you need to, hopefully not using all of that contingency would give you more, but if they use all of the contingency, is that 900,000 enough to cover the other costs?
Yes, sir. It's a little over 900,000, and it will cover all of the required items, maybe not all of the wanted items.
Okay.
Our hope is that anything not used in that additional contingency, we can finish out anything that we may need that may come up that we didn't expect. But anything that's required to be in it, such as, and some of you have asked me, the diesel exhaust removal is a soft cost. Part of the reason for that is we can't predict exactly what that will cost until we get to the 65% design phase. And generally, the firm that we pick to use will work with the general contractor to put that in. We based all that on the very high list cost side, and our 900,000 will pay for that, as well as our station alerting system, which also we can't put the final design on until we get a little further in the project design.
And then the second question, I'd written it down from reviewing the agreement, but one of the things that was critical, I know for you and for council when we looked at the different proposals, was the timeline. So now the timeline's pushed back six months already, and you've explained the reason for that, but what's the confidence that, I know it's a volatile with the market of delivering supplies, receiving supplies, what's the confidence level that 6 months is going to be accurate?
I'm confidently optimistic. We can't tell what's going to come down the pike further, but working with our design team, they've picked subs that they know are very good subs that they can count on to push the project through. It's a lot of it is dealing with the market and how quick materials can come in. So that's part of getting us locked into a guaranteed maximum price and moving forward with the 65% so that we can start locking it in. A lot of the items, the builder has committed to ordering early, storing it. A lot of the subs can order their material and store it somewhere off-site so that we can lock those prices in and be ready to roll once the construction project starts. So I feel optimistic and feel like everybody will do everything they can to make that happen. It will only be dictated by the market itself.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Mr. Maslin?
Oh, thanks, Chief. I was wondering if answer some questions for us.
I think he came specifically for that. Mr. Young, if you could come up, please.
Don's our professional project manager on this
Yes,
project.
Don Young is from the firm of MVP. We have consulted them for construction management of the project, and he's helped us with, from the start with our selection process, as well as not actually the selection process, but ironing out exactly what we were reading and all the different proposals. And he's also helped us look at the interim agreement and comprehensive agreement and make sure that what we're hearing and what we're seeing makes sense with what the market is driving us at right now. So with that, he's here to answer any questions.
Yeah, thanks. So one of the advantages of design build is to really lock in costs and determine whose risk, cost increases are going to be during the project. The last time we saw the presentation, we were at 11.4 million. We've seen two increases based on the chart here. The first one to 12.6 million. And one of the legitimate reasons for that increases would be changes in scope that the owner requests. And you could argue that some of the ARB requirements fit into that. We also saw, combining or actually analyzing those two columns, that there were columns, rows where actually some of the cost sets went down, right? So it wasn't all of them going up. There was a mixture, right?
Well, good afternoon again. My name's Don Young, and I'm with MVP, and so I'm the owner rep for the city on this project. So to answer your question, yes, that is correct. There were some that did go down. There's specific materials that we're seeing the increase, because of the market. A lot of it's supply chain issues, whether it's structural steel, lumber, like if you go to Home Depot, or, you'll see how big, plywood's gone up. I mean, just some standard type of things have gone up. Semiconductors is another one, so anything that has a chip in it, probably going to see an increase with that. And we've even seen increases in asphalt and cement, with some of our other clients. So I think it's more of just looking at, there are certain materials that will have the escalate. It's not 100%, every single thing is escalating. So some things are holding. It really depends on the supply chain for that.
Yeah, but before we talk about that, in terms of the scope, what's increased in terms of the scope? Is the area increased in terms of the size of the building? Do some of the ARB requirements require more quantities of, like I saw drywall was going up?
Correct, all the above.
Yeah, could you explain sort of that?
Well, sure. Okay, so as normally happens in a project, when you first award and then you start with the real detailed design charrettes, you're going to start seeing more details that come in from the owner and all the stakeholders that are part of the project. So because of that, there were other requirements that the city wanted to add into that to meet the requirements of the facility. And so that wasn't necessarily accounted for in the design build presentation with that, and you only get to that when you flush out the details, like in a charrette for that. So that's where those add-ons. They were all legit add-ons that the city needed.
Yes. Focusing still on that, $1.2 million increase, there were certain things we needed more information on. I think there was discussion about hazmat survey for the existing building that might influence the cost of demo. Soils investigation. Are there any other, where do we stand with those, and are there other unknowns that still may have to be researched?
I can't answer that specifically, but I know that those are in the plan to be done to add more information to that piece of it. So it validated what was in the bridging documents that the city provided to the design build team, and they may elect to go and do more soil samples depending on the orientation of the building.
And did we have a rendering we want to show or not?
It's in your packet. I don't know if we plan to.
So one of the things, can you maybe explain some of the ARB changes? Because I think they were in concert with some of our early concerns about what the project was looking like along Lafayette there, giving some interest to that.
Sure.
So the ARB's major concern was the wall that faces Lafayette Street being too stark. You know, one relief, similarly sized windows, did not really offer a lot of variation for the driver or the walker on Lafayette. And so the architect went back and redesigned that wall to include a mid-run break that's represented by a glass pane that goes from the ground all the way to the ceiling, and rearranged some of the windows, added some relief to that wall, and it really has improved the design. I don't know, Mark, if you can show the image from the packet.
I'm sorry. I do know that required more glass and steel.
Right.
The changes that were driven.
We saw the window costs go up.
Yes.
Because of that.
It's the last page on the memo packet, which is the second attachment. While he brings that up.
So, while he's bringing it up, so the final column, where we jump from 12.6 million to 13.6 million, where we talk about escalation possibilities in material costs that will really be up to us to say whether we agree with them or not. What are you using for the base? In other words, the base cost, because I don't know that they've priced out all the packages, right?
So it's built into the comprehensive agreement that they will have 10 days to be able to provide the baseline for all the numbers that they have in their GMP. And so that will become, the baseline that we'll use to evaluate. Now, we'll also use any submissions that they have throughout the rest of the design buyout for their trade subs and materials. We'll be monitoring trends nationwide as well as in this region to be able to compare with whatever the escalation that they come back with. So there are things that we're tracking on behalf of the city to make sure if a submission happens to come in to go against that contingency, that we'll be able to provide a recommendation.
Now, we know that the itemized list of trades for the $1 million potential, and each have a component, a number to it. Do they have to stay within that line item for the trade, or let's say one trade's going over that? Are we managing to the bottom line, the $1 million bottom line?
Yes.
Thank you. So we've got that flexibility in there.
Yeah, we had that in there. That was provided by the contractor as an example of what they expected.
Right.
But we feel like it would just be too cumbersome to try and hold them to those exact numbers.
Okay, yeah. Now, going to schedule. So I think some of us with construction design experience during the presentations were a little skeptical of being able to make the schedule that was presented. So we've seen that slip by 5 to 6 months. But we've seen it's not just construction time. That's the time that we're going to actually start the project just slipped, 3 or 4 months. How much of that is attributed to us maybe not recognizing review times and contract negotiation times to get to the final drawings, or maybe permit time?
Those were built in to the original timeline we had. This is all supply chain material escalation or lack of supply and all that. That's the main reason for this.
And that affects demo and the site work?
Yeah, well, yes, because you don't want to move out if the materials aren't ready to start. And so that's anytime, as well as you mentioned earlier about hazmat, I mean, we want the demo to go smoothly and stay on time and not have to deal with some hazmat, So right now, we don't think there is any.
We've been pretty clear with the contractor that we do not want to relocate the firefighters until the last moment. And so it wouldn't make sense to start demolition early if we can't then start construction on the heels of it.
Right, and that was my comment early on with maybe one of the other proposals that didn't recognize that.
Correct.
What about any concern weather-wise that, our foundations are now going to happen in the spring, and which isn't usually the best time to do foundations? Any concerns about that?
Well, you remember the Stryker building was started in the winter, and so we had some soil problems on that one. They'll have to make sure that their stormwater and the site drains real well with that, to take because normally we do get the spring rains. So it could be wet. So we'll be watching that for compaction as well as, good.
Yeah, and so now we're at a point where we're going to hopefully ink the final contract. Are we confident that we can make the date that's in the schedule now?
we're sure going to try to make it, absolutely.
Because I think having certainty there is really important.
Yeah, I agree, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I don't have questions. As I've often said, I have trust in professionals, and so I feel confident that you all will take care of all the dotting the i's and the t's and things like that. For me, I was curious to see the rendering, so I'm glad we were able to pull that up. I think Mr. Trivett mentioned that the ARB had some concerns with the wall along Lafayette Street. To be honest, I don't remember what it looked like before. Were there additional windows or awnings change, or?
My recollection is, this is the actual wall right here that you're looking at.
Right.
That stretch there, that's Lafayette Street in the foreground. And my recollection is, if Mr. Tingle's here, he could probably tell us for sure, but my recollection is that this was a flat wall that did not have any undulation. You can sort of see the undulation that's now included in the different segments. The windows were smaller, and so it sort of gave, I think the ARB's comments, I think Carolyn is here, the ARB's comment was that it looked like a barracks. And of course, the fire chief's appropriate response was, well, it sort of is a barracks. But they wanted it to have some much more defining character, and I think this end product certainly is a big improvement over that. And
Roof
so
line changed?
the roof line did change, and you can see right at the midpoint that large glass window.
Right.
So it does look much, much better. I think the ARB did a good job in helping us get the best possible product.
Yes, as someone who lives in a house with a very long side, I can appreciate having undulations and in there. And just from personal experience, I ordered 15 pieces of lumber the end of May, and they gave me a week to pay for it. They said prices had gone up 28%, and so that's all the allowance they would give me. And today I ordered a new air conditioning unit because, as always happens, your AC goes out at the heat and height of the summer, and it won't be here for 2 weeks. So just two very personal examples of both price and lead time changes. So thank you very much. Appreciate all of the work that you've done, and particularly Ms. Shelton has done to bring us to this point.
I have one quick question, clarification for myself and anyone listening. The discretionary fund of around $1 million that is up to the guaranteed price of 13.6, that's to say that should prices not change at all, the guaranteed price would almost be 12.6, right? Not that the $1 million fund is on top of the guaranteed maximum.
Correct.
Okay, and I only ask because that would encroach on the available funds,
Yes.
getting close to 14.5. But okay, well, thank you all very much for the work. The designs look fantastic, implementing both the reflection and the sun. So excited to vote in support.
And just as a follow-up, on that contingency, I think it was pointed out that will only be authorized as needed by the city manager. So there will be.
The one note to make, and I think the chief said this, is that what we don't spend on that escalating construction cost will just increase the amount that he has available for soft costs should he need it. So I don't want you to come away from this thinking that if we don't spend any of it, then that money will return to the general fund, return to the CIP. It won't. It's bond restricted to this purpose. Right. So it'll just be applied to soft costs as needed.
Well, I appreciate all your questions, and Mr. Maslin, being a professional in this, always asks good detailed questions, and timing is going to be critical, and I know that everybody understands that. We don't want our firefighters displaced longer than they have to be, and we certainly want to get the building up and operating and functioning as soon as possible. So, Sarah, that.
So I move that City Council authorize the city manager to execute a comprehensive agreement with the design-build firm of David Nice Builders, Inc., as attached, with a guaranteed maximum price of $13,616,774, subject to final legal review and approval by the city attorney.
Second.
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Mr. Maslin?
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So that now takes us to consideration and adoption of the 2021 Economic Development Plan update, COVID-19 Pandemic Impact Analysis and Recovery Plan. Ms. DeWitt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. As we discussed Monday, part of the council's goals, initiatives, and say it backwards. Sorry, goals, initiatives, and objectives project was to do a outcomes. See, I've jinxed myself.
Just
I'm
say
sorry.
GIOs.
GIOs, part of our GIOs for these 2 years is to do a COVID-19 recovery plan for economic development. So the way, and the EDA was tasked with that. So the way we did that was we took our 2019 economic development plan that you had adopted off the shelf and brushed it off and looked at what we had done and what was left to done, and then looked specifically at COVID impacts, including a survey to all our businesses and individual interviews with stakeholders, and then 3 public meetings with the EDA. So you heard the results in detail on Monday of what we're proposing. There's goal areas in 6 areas, as you can see. We're really working hard to leverage our partnerships. So, for example, when you see support talent development strategies of workforce development partners, truly we cannot do that without our partners. So that's not something that your economic development department is going to become experts and train people, but it's something that we will link with our partners to provide those resources to our workforce and our businesses. So that was one highlight that the EDA wanted to make sure council heard. So you can see the other 6 goals are to continue to market us as a choice location, increase choice business locations and small business startups and entrepreneurism, and then look at our incentive policy and make sure it's aligned with our targets and to be flexible with it. And council, you did that during COVID, so it was very much appreciated by the businesses that you realized the impacts of COVID-19. So we just need to continue to be aware of that as we move forward. The target industry sectors have not changed. They remain these 3, should not be a surprise to anyone. This is tourism and hospitality, that's our bread and butter. Professional and technical services is another example, so that's the office jobs. And then business support services. We had a great example of this Monday morning with a ribbon cutting, where another Broken Egg Cafe was opened. The owner of that business also has the rights to franchise 15 to 18 of those in the state of Virginia, and he is going to locate his back office business support services here in Williamsburg. So that's exactly what we're looking for in that targeted sector. And then health services. As I mentioned Monday, these are all growth sectors generally, and then specifically fit into the assets of Williamsburg. So that's how we determine what we target. We have an implementation plan that goes out 3 years and some ongoing efforts as well. And our overarching goals that we recommend City Council adopt continue to remain the same. That existing businesses grow and prosper here. As the mayor said at the beginning of the meeting, they are very important to our economy. They are the backbone. That's where 80% of our growth at least will be seen, is those existing businesses. We continue to work on diversification. Every region, every city, every county works on this. As businesses work to diversify their income streams, we work to diversify our economy. So if one sector falls, we have others to support us. We also want to remain to be known for our positive business environment, and we want to keep our infrastructure to support the growth and high quality of the city to support our businesses. We're known to have a beautiful physical environment, and that's something we want to make sure we keep up. Lastly, for a long time, Williamsburg was the city and was the only hub of the greater Williamsburg region. We realize now we're not the only game in town. There's a lot of things going on in the counties, but we want to make sure we remain one of those specialty hubs of the region, a place where visitors and businesses and residents and students come to spend their time and treasure. So I'm happy to answer any questions. The ask today is for you to adopt this plan as recommended by your Economic Development Authority. I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Ms. DeWitt. spent some time just kind of glazing through this. You know, and it's exciting to think about all the opportunities that we have here in Williamsburg. But a lot of these opportunities don't come without effort. And so I applaud you and your staff and the committee for, you know, putting the effort into developing a plan so that we can set a path forward to ultimate success. So thank you for that. Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I agree with the mayor. It's a comprehensive plan and much needed. The only question I had was something we touched on Monday. Is there, throughout the document, there's a lot of action steps. So we're not committing to all of those action steps by approving. We'll see more detail on those action steps and have the ability to decide on where we move forward from then.
Absolutely. So a great example would be your incentive policy. So if staff and the Economic Development Authority said, you know, to capture that health services, we need to adapt or change or add an incentive policy, that would have to be approved by City Council before it happens.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. So following up on that comment about, I thought we had talked about with the city manager, maybe 2 carve-outs that we would specifically want to come back to City Council, one of which was the ABC open carry component, and the other one was permanent tables at Merchant Square. And I don't know how we do that with the...
It was outdoor seating.
Outdoor seating, yeah.
Not specific to Merchant Square, but outdoor seating in general.
And is that something when we make the motion, we would...
Well, I think that's what Ms. DeWitt's saying, is all of these items, before there any real action taken, they would have to come back to City Council if they're City Council items for approval.
Okay, thank you.
Because, just to follow up on those 2 comments, I think those 2 particular action steps fall under the small business recovery and resiliency strategies, which I don't know if it's at the top of the list for year number 1, because that's what you're going to tackle first, but I assume that, that we'll be seeing plans or suggested plans underneath that category coming fairly soon.
Great point. And I'll also point out to not take all of Carolyn's thunder, but as you see the comprehensive plan come forward, the Economic Development Authority has been talking with the Planning Commission about that. And you're going to see some of those resiliency strategies there too, outdoor seating and dining being one of them that we discussed with them, because it's broader than just an economic effort. There are details you need to, and zoning issues you need to work through.
So, thank you. I have no other questions.
I have none either. I think this is a very exciting framework almost of kind of the Williamsburg 2040 that we talk about. Obviously, the bigger pieces of it may come back to council at some point, but it's wonderful to think of us creating a business starter kit or the programs that we'll put in place to support cluster communities. I'm excited to support and have no questions. Thank you.
Well, and I'll just conclude, you know, this is the type of activity that may not happen if we're in a municipality that doesn't fund itself appropriately. We lose these types of opportunities. And by being in a position to be vibrant and dynamic as a community, this opportunity comes that may present new opportunities. So this is exactly, being the modern, innovative city that we aspire to have. So is there a motion?
Yes, but before I do, I would just say that goes directly to number 4 and number 5, I think, the infrastructure and a high quality of a sense of place. So appreciate you saying that. So I move that City Council adopt the 2021 Economic Development Plan Update, COVID-19 Pandemic Impact Analysis and Recovery Plan.
Second.
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Mr. Maslin?
Aye.
Okay, takes us to item C, consideration and approval of Resolution 2108, enacting the City of Williamsburg's fund balance, debt, real estate, tax review, and utility fund working capital policy.
Yes, thanks, Mayor. This is an item that we've already presented to you at least once, and as I think Mr. Rogers alluded to during our discussion of the budget, the only change that we would make here is we would ask you not to act on the fund balance policy today. The fund balance policy, the city already has a fund balance policy. It stipulates our 35% number and how that will be calculated. What we were trying to add to it was a process of repayment once we fall below the 35%. In the process of drafting that, our financial advisor Davenport told us that we really needed to shoot for 2 years for it to be an effective policy. And as we showed you on those graphs, that's impossible to do with the tax rate of 64 cents. And so rather than set ourselves up for failure, our preference would be that you not adopt that one today, and we'll try for that one again next year. The rest are ready for adoption.
Okay. So we have seen these before. We've, talked about them, had some questions. Do any members of council have any questions regarding them?
No question.
So I think it's, it's obviously an additional burden to adhere to new policies, but I think it's entirely appropriate for the city to enact these measures so that we are ever more in a better position to lead moving forward.
So I move that City Council approve Resolution 21-08, adopting the debt, real estate tax rate review, and utility fund working capital policies, and not adopt the fund balance policy.
Second.
Thank you.
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Mr. Maslin?
Aye.
That takes us to D, consideration and approval of Resolution 21-13, proposed budget amendment for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2021. Ms. Dameron.
Yes, this resolution appropriates grant funds in the general fund for a total of $56,988, and they include Department of Health, VCU, paramedic program for EMS scholarships, budget correction for Virginia Powers Fund, just to get that corrected for the grant amount, DMV selective enforcement for alcohol, speed, and pedestrian grant, that's for personnel costs, a donation for a memorial bench at Waller Mill Park, and asset forfeiture funds. Be glad to entertain any questions, and staff's recommendation is that this resolution be approved as submitted.
Questions?
I think it's always helpful to accept money, so.
Always glad to do that.
Yeah, so I move that City Council approve Resolution 21-13, consistent with the staff recommendation.
Second.
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Mr. Maslin?
Aye.
Okay, this should be a fun one. Item E, an ordinance to amend Chapter 14, Article 1 to require refuse containers to be put out and returned within the limited time period prior to and after refuse collection, and to impose the civil liberty for failure to do so.
Civil penalty, I think.
Oh, excuse me, penalty. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks,
Got
Mayor.
this one.
I'm going to kick us off here, and then Ms. Shelton will back clean up. The situation with this ordinance is really pretty simple. The Neighborhood Balance Committee, in its work, recommended that we deal with trash carts. As you know, that's an issue that we've talked about at least since I've been with the city. And the topic at hand is how to deal with trash carts that are left out too long. So there are plenty of residents that leave their trash carts at the curb all week long and just carry their trash to the curb, and that's not consistent with the image that we want for Williamsburg. And so, what the tool that we are provided to deal with that is to apply a penalty when someone violates the rule that says you bring your cart in a reasonable time frame. So upon the Neighborhood Balance's recommendation, the City Council asked us to work on an ordinance, and so that's what we have done. In the review, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
In the review, what we found was instead of applying a time that you were allowed to have the cart out, say in hours, which would require the staff to know when the truck actually came to your house, which was an impossible thing for us to know because it varies from day to day. We went with a time frame designed around the date of collection, right? So we know that this neighborhood is collected on Tuesdays. So that means within a certain time frame from that Tuesday is when you can have your cart on the curb. And then, of course, state statute allows us to apply a civil penalty. And past years when we've talked about doing a trash cart ordinance, that was the part that made the council most uncomfortable, was applying a penalty. But the reality is that the staff cannot change the behavior of those that consistently violate this rule without some type of penalty. And so we have gone through and added a $25 fine after a warning. We're required to give a warning first. So that $25 fine only applies after the warning. And I think that this is fairly consistent with what other localities do that have a similar ordinance.
So I'll just walk you quickly through the ordinance. Our trash ordinance was pretty out of date because City Council's made a number of changes over the years. And so we defined who gets refuse containers. Those are both trash cans and recycling containers, and where those have to be located when it's not out for collection, which is the side yard or the rear yard. We did add or within an enclosure. So there are a few properties where that might be a little bit of a challenge to put it in the side or backyard, and so that is going to accommodate them. We provided a time frame which is not earlier than 3 o'clock the day before the collection, not later than 7 a.m. the day of collection, and then it has to be returned by 9 a.m. the day after collection, according to the ordinance as it's drafted. This only deals with the residential occupancy for the trash carts. It doesn't deal with commercial or business. That's under separate sections of the code. So this changes an existing section to amend it to what we're actually doing and to reflect reality, and then adds a few sections to impose the penalty. This is inherently tied to nuisance, right? City Council in the preamble is finding effectively that this is a nuisance. There's a reason for doing that, because if we have a persistent problem, it would be through the city's nuisance ordinance that we dealt with that. But this provides a way to deal with it sort of in the intervening period. So we've provided suggestions for what we think the penalty should be. Because this is tied to nuisance, we don't suggest going over $50 for the first offense and not over $200 for second or subsequent offense. So we still fit within the nuisance ordinance and the statutes in the state code that allows us to deal with that. And that's also why it's capped at $3,000 a year, and we've set that annual time to be from July the 1st to June the 30th, which is pretty reflective of the community that we have. And there is a process for notice that we are required to provide. So every time someone gets issued with a civil penalty, they have to have a notice in advance of that. It doesn't have to be an excessively long notice, because as with nuisance, those are things that we can give pretty short notices on. So this provides for a process of putting that notice on the door, giving the property owner or the occupant 24 hours to deal with the problem before we impose a civil penalty. That has to happen each and every time that we do this. Only the city of Roanoke has a process by which they can stop doing that after a certain number of times, and that's specific to the state legislation. It does allow the city manager to waive the penalty if the trash cans were left out through no fault of the owner. The neighbors were supposed to get the trash can when we were on vacation and they forgot to do it, that type of thing. So there's an appeal process to the city manager or their designee. If the problem is not resolved because it's a civil penalty, it then has to go to court. And so we would handle that in the same way that we handle any other code enforcement action, using our uniform summons and going to general district court to enforce the penalty. So in terms of mechanics, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Yeah, the practical application here is that this ordinance is really geared toward the habitual offender, right? This is not designed to be a tool to aggravate your neighbor that you're currently in a dispute with, right? And so if I go on vacation, I have to make the decision, am I going to put my trash out? Well, I'm leaving on Friday, knowing that the trash isn't picked up till Tuesday. Once this ordinance is passed, it answers the question for me. No, I am not going to put the trash out on Friday before the Tuesday collection, unless I arrange for my delightful neighbor, Gordon, to take care of the carts for me. And let's say that, as Ms. Shelton says, Gordon forgets about it, which is highly unlikely in my case, and I get a notice of violation, a door hanger, as we like to call them. Then I would come back from vacation, I would call the planning department and simply explain what happened, and we would resolve it that way. Also, I think it's important to point out that in this instance, we'll be using what we call reactive enforcement strategies, right? So not proactive. That means there's no inspector whose only task it is drive around the neighborhoods and look for these violations. When somebody calls in and complains, we will go out and investigate, and issue a warning as appropriate, a fine as a second course of action. If we're out doing inspections and somebody notices a violation, certainly they'll hang a door tag, but it's not the mission of a inspector to go around every day and look in the neighborhoods where we've done trash collection and search out the violations.
So walk me through, who amongst city staff can issue the warning?
City manager's designee.
Okay. So maybe Ms. Shelton? I mean, or is it going to be the planning department? Is it going to be the police department? I mean,
You know,
what do
most
think?
often it's going to be either a public works employee or a planning department employee.
And who can issue the violation?
The inspector. Yeah. Because the violation is, it's the second step. So you get the door hanger, and then you get the violation that essentially serves as legal notice. You're in violation of the ordinance. You're in violation of the ordinance because I hung this door hanger on this day at this time. It's very specific so that when Ms. Shelton eventually may have to take that evidence to court so the court can find the violation and levy the fine.
Well, this is one of those unfortunate ordinances that I don't like to see. There's so many reasons why people leave trash cans out, but as you pointed out, it's the habitual offender that we've already, as a community and neighbors and city staff, have talked to about returning their carts back to their appropriate place. And it is a problem, particularly on some of the crowded streets in and around the college. I traverse Harrison Avenue daily, and those trash cans never move. And it impedes people's ability to park in front of their homes. I mean, you name it. Also, and it's just an eyesore. So I think having some sort of penalty is warranted. Maybe $25 is too much. Mr. Rogers will probably tell a story that I think is appropriate. But Mayor?
Yeah, I agree with the mayor on the point that when this was originally talked about out of the Neighborhood Balance Committee, I just didn't know if that was something that the city needed to get involved in. It seems kind of heavy-handed, but I do appreciate the neighborhoods that have the habitual offenders, and that's who this is targeted for. But also, Mr. Trivett, during their meetings, did the neighborhood balance, maybe not review this particular one, but look at examples?
They did not, no. The neighborhood balance, they had so many items on their plate. We didn't dig into any with any great detail. If you recall, I think we showed you the PowerPoint slides that talked about here's what you told us you wanted to consider, and then we said here's how it works at other places, here's how it could work in Williamsburg. To the extent that they had that framework, that's what they made their decision on.
And the reason I ask that is we've already received a couple emails that since this was posted that, well, what about this? And there's so many variables, it's concerning going forward. While I support and appreciate the issue that's occurring, I think down the road there's going to be a lot of variables. And also think that while we're looking for those habitual offenders, maybe people that are having an issue in particular neighborhoods figured out their call, the complaints weren't addressing the issue, so they stopped calling, but now we're going to have an ordinance in place, so that may trigger them to start calling again, or others that have never called just to start calling because we have that in place. And I appreciate the fact that it's going to be reactive. Do you have a sense? How do you feel about? Do you see complaints increasing, and how much additional burden does that put on staff to address these complaints?
Yeah, I think, let me answer some of your questions all at one time. I think, with any ordinance, there's the likelihood that we'll come back and make an amendment based on a situation that we didn't anticipate. It's really hard to anticipate all those at the first drafting. So I do think we'll come back and make some changes to this to tidy up the ordinance. I think Ms. Shelton may have already identified some things she'd like to change about the trash cart ordinance as a whole. Your question about the volume of citations and the activity of calls, I think yes. I mean, it's sort of like when we've talked about parking and raising those rates. in the beginning, you issue a lot of tickets until the behavior changes. And so I think that will happen as neighbors now are armed with a tool to try and accomplish what they want to accomplish on their street. There will be calls, there will be citations issued, and the habitual offenders will learn, I think, particularly at a rate of $25 pretty quickly, that they've got to comply. And so, in other words, it'll start off like this and then
Right.
sort of back down as people comply.
Okay. And then I had one question, just not really a question, a comment under 14-3 on the ordinance, under 3E. I'm assuming that's just to protect, because it's like we're talking about when to put your containers out, when to take them in, and then we have no article of value shall be placed in on top of near garbage or waste.
So I think Mr. Clayton can tell you why that is in the code, because that is an existing section of the city code that has carried over to this. I'm going to turn it over to Dan because I don't want to steal his thunder.
It has to do with, we've had some cases of this. Somebody will get the garbage cart there, and somebody put something that somebody else is supposed to come pick up, DAV or a friend that's got some value. Well, the garbage guy doesn't know. You know, we get on those guys that don't pick everything up, so they pick up more than they should. And so I know we chased down, I forgot what it was now, a few years back, all the way to the landfill to get something for, I'll forget what the article was, but anyway.
And that's why you live in Williamsburg.
That's right.
Because any other locality, they would have said, I'm sorry that happened.
But I knew there had to be some reason for that being included.
It does happen.
Because it just jumped, when we're talking about containers and putting them out and taking them in, and then all of a sudden we're talking about no articles of value. So that makes sense. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
That's all I have.
I lost a child's bike that way, so.
Following up on the backstory, I just wonder whether we want to reword that, saying something like the city or the vendor's not responsible for, taking anything away that's next to.
So Mr. Trevette is correct that there's some additional cleanup that we really need to do with respect to the whole ordinance, the article in its entirety with respect to trash and weed collection. That doesn't really happen the way that it currently is in the code. But we were trying to get this out, and so that was not the number one priority, but you will see this again with all of those items of cleanup done.
And fortunately, I was able to talk to the city attorney about some of my questions and comments. And I know Kayla may want to talk about the amount of the fines. I just want to bring something to everybody's attention to see if this is really what we want it to do. So my understanding is, let's say the cart's out there Monday, and we go through the process of, having the warning, and it stays out there all week. My understanding, the way that it is written, that cumulative fines are accruing, so you could get all those fines in what we consider one instance.
That's right.
And does city council really want that to happen, is the question.
So I would offer this one comment on that. Yes, that is entirely possible, but that sort of assumes that the person who's handling the violation is unaware of the situation, right? I think certainly in the inspectors in Carolyn's office, if they issue a violation and they notice that the mail's still in the box, the papers are piling up on the porch, they're going to use their intuition to decide that probably the folks that we're trying to reach aren't home. And so I don't know that would happen in an instance where somebody just was on vacation. But in an instance where somebody was ignoring us, 100% that could happen.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you for the ordinance, and I guess my question, since there seems to be some cleanup needed, is it better for us to pass the ordinance and then do that cleanup, or postpone that and then do the cleanup and bring it back to us?
Well, of course, that's entirely up to you. It is not necessary to hold off on this ordinance in order to start this program if that's what City Council wants to do. We're really focused on how do we get the penalties worked in and not on all of the details of the reality of trash pickup and all the permutations of trash pickup and what that looks like with respect to landscaping materials and businesses and dumpsters. So It's entirely up to you what the timing of this is.
And since I live on a street, a dead-end street with a number of student rentals, I have personal experience with some of these things, such as, students take their trash cans when they're full after a weekend, put them on the street, then they go away for fall break. The trash cans get emptied, but there's no one at home to take them back. And so I guess the question is it better for the full trash cans to sit by the side of the house attracting nuisance animals as opposed to being on the street, which is another consideration. And so I think in those instances, we really need to be sure that the property management companies are involved and aware so that, if there is a holiday weekend or something like that, the trash is appropriately taken care of. And thinking about my next door neighbor who has a ravine next to the house, and they always put their trash cans in front of the house. They move them back from the street, but it's right up against the front wall. He lives in Richmond, so will we be doing outreach to all of the landlords specifically to make them aware that they need to have an enclosure or something to shield the trash cans? And if they don't, is there going to be a penalty for that as far as when people are out, perhaps Public Works driving along and sees that, yes, the cans are taken back, but they're up against the house. And I assume that anyone who's out, whether it be Public Works, planning, city manager, will have a supply of hang tags in the car and that they can then put them up there. And also in my neighborhood, I have a feeling there will be some neighbors with stopwatches, sort of checking to be sure of, okay, is it 9 o'clock? Let me go see if the trash can is removed, and I'm going to make a call to planning because she does for everything else. And I guess the question too is if the trash company is delayed and, we'll get a notice, your trash wasn't able to be picked up, leave your trash can on the street. So some people may not know that it wasn't picked up, and so that will be another consideration. And as another comment about the cost to staff, I could see that at the beginning, the cost to staff could exceed the penalties, particularly with the warnings and things like that. And again, from personal experience, I imposed a $25 fine on my tenants if they hadn't taken the trash can back, and I gave them 2 days. $25 wasn't enough to change their behavior. It was only when I bumped it up to $50 that when they got the first, and I didn't give them a warning, when they got a notice from the property management that they were going to be fined at $50, it's like, please don't do that. For some people, $25 is just a couple cups of coffee. And when you and I were talking, Mr. Trivett, we talked about the reason to include the time to have the trash cans at the curb. And I'd appreciate it if you'd let people know the reason behind that, because some may say, well, if you just get them out there the day of, what's the big deal?
Yeah, I mean, we're not going to be out there looking to see if you're in violation of that, obviously. But if you, that's to help us react to customers that call us and say, hey, I forgot to put the can out. Mr. Clayton can attest to that. Sometimes happens with the guy that lives on 16 Cole Lane. And so, when I call and say, hey, Dan, I forgot to put my trash out, he can say, yeah, but the ordinance says you got to have it out by 7. We'll see you next week, as opposed to saying, we'll get out there and get it tomorrow. And that's the purpose for it.
Okay. So no other questions?
2 things for me. I appreciate the fact that the ordinance would be a little bit more reactive than proactive. I do feel that we're putting it in place to try to reach those habitual offenders, and in doing so, I feel like I see a lot of city cars driving past my street, and it may be people who have hang tags for warnings. Now, granted, I've lived on Richmond Road and Virginia Avenue, so those are more traversed areas. But I would hope that in being reactive, we could maybe lessen the amount of reaction so that if there is a complaint or if there are a number of complaints from a certain area about particular tenants or just their part of town, then we go and we check that problem, but we don't become overhanded where everyone who's driving around has a couple of hang tags and then it just becomes a part of their job to hang it when they see it and we start to overfine. So that'd be my recommendation, is that the ordinance would more be enforced based on complaints rather than just when you see one out, because that would be almost proactive in a sense. The second thing, and the story that a couple people have alluded to, I appreciate nobody stealing it for their own comments, but it's the fact that I shop at Aldi's, and Aldi's, and trying to be a very renewable grocery store, makes you put a quarter into the cart and you take the cart back. It makes you spend 10 cents to use one of their plastic bags. And so I've now bought plastic bags that I take back every single time. And it takes me about 4 plastic bags to do a load of groceries. So doing the math there, that'd be $20 in a year instead of just taking the bags and throwing them away. In other words, it's changed my behavior with a very nominal cost of being 10 cents per bag or 40 cents a shopping trip. For that reason, my recommendation is that we lower the fine for someone. The warning is a first method, obviously makes sense and is required, but that we lower it instead to, as I would propose, maybe just $10 each time. And perhaps there are repeated, offenders, but I think they would realize eventually that that's going to keep coming as long as they continue doing what they're doing, except they haven't over the course of 5 weeks, let's say. Since you did say when we adjust parking ticket ordinances, there's an initial period of maybe more ticketing before behavior changes. Someone hasn't racked up almost $400 in debt to the city without even really realizing that they need to change their behavior first. So my recommendation would be to lower the cost of that ordinance to $10 per fine. And if that's not something that we're able to do today, and I'm not sure, is that something that we would be able to enact today, or would it need to be tabled?
No, you can do it. You just need to tell me what you want it to be and put that in the motion.
Okay, well then I will put that amount out there for discussion, is maybe $10 per fine after the warning first, and for that to maintain.
I would be okay with $10 for the first one, but I think that to try to change someone's behavior, it needs to have an escalation. Now, I think that, doesn't need to jump up quite as fast as 25 to 50, 100, but I think there, as I say, there needs to be some escalation.
Who is getting fined? The tenant or the property owner?
Everyone is responsible, right? So it's joint and several liability. If we can identify who the tenant is, that's who'll get the notice, but I cannot always identify who the tenants are. And so property owner, tenant, occupant, property managers are also, or agents are also responsible. Agents for the owner.
But the hang tag will be put on the house.
Yes, and so to deal with that issue, I have added an additional notice requirement to the property owner of 10 days, right? So the notice gets put on the door, nothing happens, the civil penalty gets assessed, that notice gets put on the door, but then we're also mailing to the property owner a notice of violation, and they have 10 days to respond to that. So it's not like we're going to go to court the next day after we do that. There's an opportunity to contest that to the city manager. So those notice due process requirements are built in.
Now,
then I'm sorry, the reason I asked that question, because I think it's important, if it is a tenant renting a house that is the habitual offender, but the landlord also then gets notified, then that aids in helping correct the behavior.
That's right.
So with that, I can see maybe $10 being appropriate, maybe doing 10 with maybe 2 10s and then an escalation.
Well, and what I was going to say is, as I mentioned, someone could put their can out and be gone for 4 days and not, think that someone was going to put it, or not think about it. So I might be okay considering not having a fine every single day for the week. But that probably makes it hard to follow up. I don't know. And
as it's been pointed out, if it is an extenuating circumstance that it's been out for 2 days or 3 days, I forgot Gordon was supposed to get it, a simple phone call to the city manager's office, gets that the fine waived. And I think your point observation about, if we know it's fall break,
Right.
and the kids put their trash can, or the tenants put their trash can out the Friday before the Monday pickup, that makes good sense. And as we go around and see that, that's not the time to hang the tag.
Right,
And I
right.
think that type of flexibility in the ordinance is a good step.
But there will be some who will,
Granted. But again, this is designed to get the habitual offender.
Right.
So I think we can collectively work to make sure that we get that end result. And so I could see us doing 10, 10, 25, 50 over a course of 4 violations.
I still think, if I, every day or every week on Sunday mornings, go to shop at Aldi's, they're not saying, if you continue to buy bags from us, we're going to bump up the price. It's just the loss aversion of $10, even if that's nominal between, 3 people in a house. Again, it does add up if they get fined multiple times. So their debt then becomes $30 after 3 weeks. Maybe it doesn't need to jump up to 20 to make them realize it, because they're still having to pay more. So I would think, I would cap it at well, quite honestly, I think it should remain at 10, and that people, if they get it every week, they're going to quickly realize, I'm doing something wrong, because 10's going to add up. Then you can just have one at a time.
but we don't have a set fee for parking. We don't say, okay, every time you get a parking fee, every time the college assesses a parking ticket, that it's $10 across the board. So to me, I guess the policy is we have had escalation in our thing, in most of our policies. I got parking tickets in DC, and their final thing was they just booted me, yeah.
She's an habitual offender.
The only thing I would offer to that discussion is there is a direct correlation between the fine amount and how much work is required on the part of staff to change the behavior. So let's say you live in Ms. Ramsey's neighborhood, and she apparently has that neighbor with a stopwatch. I'm going to have to order mine, evidently. At $10, that person's going to call consistently and require us to go out and do the hang tag, right? I mean, that's the thing, is when somebody calls the complaint, we're going to have to go check it, and if it's in violation, we'll have to hang the tag. So, I think escalating it is the only way to try and curb the behavior fast enough to not have staff completely chewed up with trash can violations, at least initially. I think over time, maybe we can change this. But, and the other thing that we've talked about a little bit today was the enclosure requirements and the odd situations that exist with some houses that just can't put the trash can behind it. That's why we have people do these jobs. It's because they can use their best judgment, they can be lenient when they need to be, and I think we have a pretty good track record of working with people who need assistance. So.
And I would also point out that each and every one of these, if they're not prepaid, have to go to court. And that means that I am prepping a staff person to put on evidence in front of a judge. And so in addition to the time actually spent out in the neighborhood, there's additional time on top of that where we're actually having to enforce the civil penalty for repeat offenders. And if that penalty is $10, that's not reflective of the amount of work on the back end that this takes as well.
And I'm guessing we don't have money included in the budget to cover staff's cost for taking care of all of this extra work, at least initially.
That's right. Yeah. This is not an ordinance intended to generate revenue, but it is, we would be hoping that the fines would help at least offset the cost of doing the enforcement.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I'm okay with whatever we can agree upon as what the rate needs to be, but I would suggest that we set a time to revisit it, so if we're not changing the behavior, so that we can adjust those rates higher to make sure that we're correcting the behavior.
Yeah, and to that point, I hate to throw another log on the fire, but I can't resist. I was talking to the town manager of Nags Head recently, and we were talking about trash, imagine that, and they actually pay a contracting firm whose job it is to move the cans back for the residents because they gave up trying to win this battle.
And they do that in the neighborhood, the little area where I have my beach house, the same thing, because people put their cans out, they leave, and they sit there until sometimes a week. So, yeah, they have a person that they pay to take the cans back every Sunday and Thursday, Saturday and Thursday, Wednesday.
One additional bit of information, when City Council last discussed this, there were some issues about persons who are physically unable to move their cans, and Dan already deals with those situations with a phone call and a request, so I just wanted to throw that in there.
So I made a recommendation of 10-10, 25-50.
Ted had something to say.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ted.
So I agree with staff's comments, recommendations, and I really think Barbara's been adding this up in her head, though, for additional revenue. But would it help to, we've had some recommendations to look at things in terms of the wording. Would it help to sort of postpone this to the next meeting? Also, it gives the opportunity to benefit from any more public input, because this has really been under the radar. And we know that based on our last meeting when we discussed it, it was the headline for the whole meeting. Now, whether it'll bump off the budget discussion, I'm not so sure, but I think we'll get more input in the next month, which might help us.
And I'm fine with tabling it, like I said at the beginning.
That's your all's choice.
So I think Mr. Maslin's correct. Let's, we've had this discussion. I think we're communicating with the community that this is the direction we're going, and if people feel compelled to come and speak next month, they'll at least have the opportunity. So I will go ahead and table this. Do we need a motion to table?
Yes. So I move that City Council table proposed ordinance 21-05.
Second?
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Mr. Maslin?
Aye.
Item F, Resolution 21-12, clarifying the budget amendment to the Tourism Fund in Resolution 2109. Ms. Dameron.
Yes, this is a correction, and basically what I did when I wrote 2109 is I looked at our budget amendment list, but we had some carry forward. So I inadvertently wrote the ordinance with the beginning adopted revenues at the original budget that did not include the carry forwards. So I would like to ask that we correct that and include the I believe it was $1,127,293 in carry forwards that we had for those grant projects that did carry forward, both for transparency and just consistency in the way that we write these resolutions.
So it's pretty straightforward. Yeah.
So I move that City Council adopt Resolution 21-12 to include carry forward revenues and expenditures from FY 2020, correcting Resolution 21-09 that was adopted May 13, 2021.
Second.
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Mr. Maslin?
Aye.
Okay, that takes us to appointments to the Economic Development Authority. Mr. Vice Mayor.
Let's see. I recommend that council appoint Andrew Crawford, effective immediately, to fill the unexpired term of David Trexler to expire June 30th, 2024.
Second.
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Mr. Maslin?
Aye.
Okay, and before I go to open forum, I meant to bring this up when we were talking about the budget. We had talked about the grant program that would offer assistance to taxpayers in need. I'd like to see something come back to council for consideration, maybe next month if that's too soon, maybe the following month.
Yeah, it'll probably be the following month. We need to let some of the dust settle on ARP before we come forward with that. And we've got plenty of time because taxes aren't due till December.
I understand. I want, made that commitment. I just
Sure.
want the residents and business.
Yeah, we want to bring it forward and obviously have enough time for people to apply for the relief.
Right, okay, good. Okay, so that takes us to open forum. I do have 3 speakers card, 2 from one individual, Rick Roddington. Okay. Okay, so this would be your opportunity. The subject is your gift to Williamsburg. In the subject line, you have the gift to Williamsburg. Would you like to come to the podium and? Thank you, Mr. Okay. If you just come forward and state your name and address for the record and keep your comments to about 5 minutes. Thank you, sir. Welcome.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Oh, I'm wearing my pin from the Neighborhood Watch that the Williamsburg Police gave to me back in 1997 when I volunteered to be the coordinator for Piney Creek Estates to establish the Neighborhood Watch and work with the police also to organize the watch meetings. We used to do the watch meetings every 3 months until people stopped coming, and then they just petered out. I mean, that's the problem that the police have. People lose interest in the meetings if there's no crime. Now let me get to this. Dear council members, I would like to inform you of interesting news. To mark my 25th year residing in this beautiful, historic city, I recently was inspired to give something back to the citizens of our community that would not only be important and meaningful, but hopefully might influence people to improve their quality of life. As I'm experienced in creating websites, I decided to establish one for the residents of Williamsburg and name it Roddy Web. Starting from a blank template, I've been working on its construction for the last 6 weeks. My new site, which has actually been online since May 1st, is now ready to be announced to the public. My hero is Albert Einstein, who was not only a theoretical physicist, but also a philosopher and a great humanitarian. I'm familiar with his writings, lectures, and letters detailing his views on life. On the home page, you may discover his definition of the meaning of life. The Einstein Quotes page lists a number of his other brilliant thoughts and viewpoints. The home page has a list of what I believe should be the city's priorities and an article I wrote that was published twice in 1998. It's a 13-point plan titled Simple Ways You Can Make Your Neighborhood a Better Place to Live. On the commentaries page, I wrote about the unfortunate sale of Tribune Publishing to Alden Global Capital and my concerns with the indoor sports complex initiative. On the opinions page, you can find my review of the city wireless broadband router and my comments on the proposed Williamsburg real estate tax rate increase. That's what I was going to talk about. I thought you were going to have a public forum, a public hearing, I'm sorry. You may view my new website at, this is the URL. Has not yet been indexed by the search engine bots. So you can't type in Roddy Web in the search engine because it won't be displayed. I just want to give you just a quick preview. This is one of my favorite quotes from Albert Einstein. It's on the Einstein's quotes page. I believe in intuition and inspiration. Imagination is more important than knowledge, for knowledge is limited, whereas imagination embraces the entire world, stimulating progress, giving birth to evolution. It is, strictly speaking, a real factor in scientific research. On the commentaries page, I'll just give you a quick preview. Tribune sale to Alden is cause for concern. Paragraph 1, on May 21st, Tribune Publishing shareholders voted to approve the sale of the Tribune newspapers to Alden Global Capital, a New York-based hedge fund with a reputation for slashing costs, cutting newsroom jobs, cutting back on reporting, and doubling profit margins. Paragraph 4, the Tribune sale is cause for serious concern. Years ago in New York, Gannett Company, the largest newspaper chain in America, bought the papers in Westchester, that's where I lived, in Yonkers, Rockland and Putnam counties, on January 1st, 1999, that was after I moved here, Gannett folded all of them into one regional newspaper called the Journal News. Paragraph 6, if Alden Global Capital uses the same playbook as Gannett Company, all of the newspapers Alden now owns in Hampton Roads could be in danger of being folded into one paper. Be warned, this would be detrimental to the interests of the public, but beneficial to the shareholders. Paragraph 7, our founding fathers believed that newspapers were essential to maintain a vibrant democracy. The public needs to be informed about what is happening in their community, including knowledge of what their local government is doing. Citizens in a democratic system require information and transparency. And just quick, on the sports complex, I'll just tell you paragraph 7. Due to the serious financial implications involved in this very costly project, it is imperative that city officials obtain a comprehensive master plan for the Colonial Williamsburg Visitor Center area. This should be done before any construction starts.
Mr. Roddington, your time has expired.
Yes.
I'll give you a couple more seconds, though.
Trying to get to the home page. I need to make this brighter, sorry.
Well, Mr. Roddington, if it's okay, because we're over time, if any member of council might want to see you afterwards, can they meet you in the lobby? Roddy's Web, all right. Thank you, Mr. Roddington. Appreciate you coming forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I bid the council good day, thank you.
I have one last speaker's card. Kristen Davis. Thank you for being so patient.
First of all, I apologize. I know you guys already voted on the tax proposal, so I guess it's a little more past tense, but I know that an ongoing budget and changes are something that will keep going in the future, so if you don't mind me still speaking on it.
Sure.
First of all, I feel like a little nervous and in awe because I love Williamsburg and really treasure living here, and so seeing all the background people behind making this the town I love is really a wonderful opportunity, and I appreciate you guys giving me a chance to come forward because I really love this town, and I know a lot of work goes into each part of that. With the property tax, I appreciated hearing your discussion today. You talked about the silent majority was something you guys mentioned, and I guess I would have been a part of that because this year's been a lot, pretty swamping. And I know a lot of people have felt depression and anxiety and suicide rates, and all of us have been touched by that. And so property taxes probably weren't on the forefront for a lot of us, and that's probably why many of us were silent. And I apologize because we should be more involved. But there was a lot going on this year. I've never been to a city council before, so I guess I would fall under that silent often too much, and I should be more involved. But I will say, what got me out here today is that I feel like during hard times is a good time when financial crisis comes. It is a good time to pull back. And we have beautiful oak trees here in Williamsburg. And during hard years, their rings are thin and they pull in and they focus on their roots. And when good years come, they grow, they blossom, and the acorns come and they are fruitful. And it's wonderful. But during those hard years, like pandemics, we pull in. And I just feel like now and the upcoming couple of years are a hard time for us to be trying to have tons of acorns and to blossom and have everyone say, wow, look at this huge oak tree. Because right now, I don't think there's anything wrong pulling in, focusing on our roots, holding back financially, and maybe keeping those cuts going a couple more years. I just feel strongly that we do that in our own homes. And you mentioned that people weren't specific enough in what we addressed and like how we're cutting back. You know, if it's, are they not making their car payments? Well, I can tell you like things like swim lessons, they're not happening for my girls this year. And that's okay. We cut back. And I know that you guys see things on the large layout like sidewalks and things, and those are important, but they're also happening in our homes. It's not just at a town level. I lay awake at night stressing because of how much we've pulled out of our rainy day fund. I've tried to live debt-free. I've tried really hard to be financially a good steward of the money I have, but I have had to pull out significantly during the pandemic. And I do worry about that. It stresses me. And I know, I'm sure it stresses you, pulling out of the big rainy day fund on a much larger level. And I know the weight of all of us citizens falls on you. And so I know you've had to think greatly on it. But I don't think there's anything wrong with it taking a little longer to refill. And you mentioned that you were concerned that places would raise our rates and wouldn't be as willing to lend to us. But I think that's very short-sighted if they judge us so quickly on a pandemic. And I would be shocked if other towns aren't going through similar things. So this town is an incredible place. Places like Williamsburg don't exist everywhere. And I think you will see the numbers continue to grow more than expected. A dear friend of mine is a real estate agent. She says there are not enough houses for all the people that are flooding Williamsburg. I think we will have funds coming in and people coming in, and I love that we are a melting pot of so many incredible people. And I just hope that it can stay an affordable town. I personally am just a young family. I'm raising 2 little girls here in this town, and finances are a little tighter. And that's okay. And we'll cut back and we'll pay our taxes. But we will feel it. We will feel this tax raise. We have a small home, so it probably won't be as big as the big business owners, but we will feel that cut. And so I would hope that in the future that, and when times are good, I'm more than happy to give more. But right now, times are hard. And so I'm out of time, but thank you for.
Well, thank you for coming forward. I appreciate your sentiment. Thank you. Does anybody else would like to come forward? Seeing none, I will close the open forum. Next on the agenda is adjournment. Is there anything else to come before council?
Nope.
Take a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Mr. Maslin?
Aye.